Welcome, I'm John, and today I'm going to tell you an exciting story. Rich man mocks cleaning lady in front of everyone, and what happens next will shock you. The snowflakes fell thick and relentless over Manhattan that Tuesday morning, blanketing the streets in a cold, unforgiving white. EMILY RIVERA pulled her threadbare coat tighter around her chest as she stepped off the subway at Lexington Avenue, her breath forming small clouds in the frozen air. The missing button near her collar let the wind slice through, chilling her to the bone. She didn't complain. Complaining changed nothing. It was 5:47 a.m. The city was still waking up, but Emily had been awake for hours. She'd left her cramped studio apartment in Queens at 4:30, taking 2 trains and walking 3 blocks through the blizzard to arrive early at Whitestone Holdings. The overtime wasn't guaranteed, but the extra hours meant she could finally afford Marco's medication this month. Her 15-year-old brother's asthma had been getting worse, and the inhaler he needed wasn't covered by their bare-bones insurance plan. Emily pushed through the revolving doors of the glass and steel tower, nodding to the night security guard, Tom, who was finishing his shift. He looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed. "Morning, Tom," she said softly, offering a small smile. "You're here early again, Emily," he replied, shaking his head. "You work too hard, kid." She shrugged. "Gotta do what you gotta do." The elevator ride to the 34th floor was quiet, the hum of the machinery the only sound. Emily watched her reflection in the polished steel doors, a young woman with dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back into a practical ponytail, wearing a faded sweatshirt over her cleaning uniform. She looked tired. She was tired, but giving up wasn't an option. It never had been. The offices of Whitestone Holdings were immaculate, all sleek lines and expensive furniture. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline, now obscured by the snowstorm. Emily moved through the space with practiced efficiency, her cleaning cart rolling silently across the marble floors. She started in the executive lounge, wiping down the glass tables, polishing the chrome fixtures, and vacuuming the plush carpets that cost more than she made in 6 months. No one ever thanked her. No one ever saw her. And that was fine. Emily didn't need recognition. She needed the paycheck. By 7:30 a.m., the office began to fill with staff. Men and women in tailored suits hurried past her without a glance, their designer shoes clicking against the floor, their conversations filled with stock prices and merger deals. Emily continued her work, invisible as always, moving like a ghost through their world. At 8 o'clock sharp, James Whitestone arrived. Emily had seen him before, of course. Everyone had. The CEO of Whitestone Holdings was impossible to miss. Tall, broad-shouldered, with perfectly styled dark hair graying at the temples. He wore suits that probably cost more than her entire year's rent, and he walked with the confidence of a man who had never been told no. At 42, James Whitestone had inherited his father's empire and expanded it into a billion-dollar investment firm. He was powerful, wealthy, and utterly untouchable. He was also, from what Emily had observed, completely indifferent to anyone he deemed beneath him. That morning, James strode through the office with his usual air of authority, barely acknowledging the greetings from his staff. Emily kept her head down, focusing on cleaning the fingerprints off a glass partition near the conference room. She could hear voices inside. An important meeting was about to begin. Investors, probably. James's assistant, Lauren, rushed past with a stack of folders, looking stressed. Emily finished the partition and moved toward the boardroom. Through the glass walls, she could see James pointing at a presentation screen, his expression sharp and commanding. The investors sat around the long mahogany table, nodding along. Everything looked perfect, professional, controlled. But then James's gaze shifted, landing on the window behind the investors. His jaw tightened. Emily followed his line of sight and felt her stomach drop. There, barely visible in the morning light, was a small smudge on the glass, a fingerprint she must have missed during her early morning rounds. Before she could react, James stood abruptly and strode to the boardroom door, yanking it open. "You," he said, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. He was looking directly at her. "The cleaning lady. Come here." Emily's heart hammered in her chest. Every head in the boardroom turned toward her. She stepped forward slowly, her hands gripping the handle of her cleaning cart. "Yes, sir," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. James pointed at the window. "Do you see that? That smudge? Right there?" Emily nodded, her face flushing with embarrassment. I'm sorry. I'll clean it right away." Sorry? James interrupted, his tone dripping with disdain. You're sorry? I have 15 investors in this room, and you couldn't be bothered to do your job properly? He gestured toward the executives watching the exchange with varying degrees of discomfort. This is what happens when you hire people who don't care about excellence. Emily felt the heat of shame crawl up her neck. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor, but she forced herself to stand tall, meeting his eyes for just a moment before lowering her gaze. I'll fix it immediately, sir, she said quietly. James waved her off dismissively. Just get it done, and next time maybe show up on time instead of rushing through your work. He turned back to the boardroom, leaving Emily standing alone in the hallway, the eyes of dozens of employees boring into her back. She'd been there since 5:47 a.m. She'd walked through a snowstorm. She'd given up sleep, warmth, and comfort just to be here. But to James Whitestone, she was just another person who didn't matter. Emily's hands trembled as she sprayed the glass cleaner onto the boardroom window. Through the transparent barrier, she could see James Whitestone resuming his presentation, his voice smooth and confident, as if nothing had happened. The investors had already shifted their attention back to the numbers on the screen, the brief disruption forgotten. But for Emily, the humiliation burned like a fresh wound. She wiped the smudge away with careful, deliberate strokes, making sure every inch of glass was spotless. Her reflection stared back at her, eyes slightly red, jaw clenched tight. She refused to cry. Not here. Not where they could see her. When she finished, Emily gathered her supplies and retreated to the supply closet on the 32nd floor, a small windowless room that smelled of bleach and lemon polish. She sat on an overturned bucket, pressing her palms against her eyes, taking slow, measured breaths. The shame would pass. It always did. She'd faced worse than a CEO's harsh words. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Marco. Running low on inhaler. Can you pick up refill today? Emily's chest tightened. The prescription would cost $73. Money she'd planned to use for groceries this week. But Marco needed it. He always came first. I'll get it after work, she typed back. How are you feeling? Good. Stop worrying about me. Emily allowed herself a small smile. Marco was trying to be strong for her, the same way she tried to be strong for him. Ever since their parents died 8 years ago, they'd become experts at pretending everything was fine, even when it wasn't. She tucked her phone away and stood up, squaring her shoulders. There were still 4 floors to clean before her shift ended at 2. By lunchtime, word of the incident had spread through the office like wildfire. Emily could feel it in the way people looked at her, some with pity, others with indifference, a few with barely concealed schadenfreude. She kept her head down, moving from office to office with mechanical efficiency. In the break room, she overheard 2 administrative assistants whispering near the coffee machine. Did you see what Mr. Whitestone did to that cleaning lady this morning? One of them said, her voice low but audible. It was brutal. She probably deserved it. The other replied with a shrug. If you can't do your job right, you shouldn't be here. Emily's grip tightened on her spray bottle, but she said nothing. She finished wiping down the counter and left the room without looking back. At 1 o'clock, she took her lunch break in the stairwell, a quiet corner on the 28th floor where no one ever went. She'd packed a peanut butter sandwich and an apple, both of which she'd planned to eat. But when she saw Tom, the security guard, sitting on the stairs looking defeated, she changed her mind. Rough morning? Emily asked, sitting down beside him. Tom rubbed his face with both hands. My daughter's car broke down and I had to lend her money for repairs. Now I'm short on rent. He glanced at Emily's lunch. Don't mind me. Just feeling sorry for myself. Emily handed him the sandwich without hesitation. Here, I'm not that hungry anyway. Emily, no. Take it, Tom. Seriously. She smiled. We've all been there. Tom accepted the sandwich with a grateful nod, his eyes glistening slightly. You're a good kid, you know that? Emily shrugged. Just trying to get by, same as everyone else. Upstairs, in his corner office, James Whitestone sat behind his desk, reviewing quarterly projections. His assistant, Lauren Chen, knocked softly before entering. She was a composed woman in her early 30s, efficient and professional, with a keen eye for detail. Mr. Whitestone, I have the reports you requested, Lauren said, placing a folder on his desk. She hesitated, then added, May I speak candidly for a moment? James glanced up, eyebrows raised. Go ahead. What happened this morning in the boardroom? Lauren paused, choosing her words carefully. Some of the staff found it uncomfortable. James leaned back in his chair, his expression unchanging. I hold everyone to high standards, Lauren. That includes the cleaning staff. If there's a problem with that, they're welcome to work somewhere else. Of course, sir. Lauren nodded, but something in her tone suggested she wasn't entirely satisfied with his answer. I'll have HR send you the updated personnel files you requested. After she left, James returned to his work, dismissing the conversation from his mind. He had a company to run, deals to close, investors to impress. He didn't have time to worry about hurting someone's feelings. But later that afternoon, when Lauren delivered the HR files to his office, she accidentally left Emily Rivera's file on top of the stack. James noticed the name. He'd seen it on her uniform badge that morning. Out of idle curiosity, he opened it. The first page listed basic information. Emily Rivera, age 25, employed for 14 months, perfect attendance record, no disciplinary issues. But it was the section under emergency contact that made him pause. Guardian of minor sibling, Marco Rivera, age 15. Parents, deceased. James flipped to the next page. There, in Emily's own handwriting from her original application, was a brief personal statement. I'm willing to work any hours necessary. My brother depends on me, and I won't let him down. James closed the file slowly, a strange feeling settling in his chest. Something uncomfortable, something he couldn't quite name. He pushed it aside and returned to his work. But throughout the rest of the day, that one line kept echoing in his mind. I won't let him down. The week following the boardroom incident dragged on like a slow bruise forming. Each day a reminder of Emily's public humiliation. She continued her work with the same quiet diligence, arriving early and leaving late, but something had shifted in the atmosphere around her. Some employees now offered sympathetic smiles when they passed her in the hallways. Others seemed more uncomfortable than before, averting their eyes as if her presence reminded them of their own complicity in her humiliation. Emily didn't want their pity. She just wanted to be invisible again. On Thursday evening, as she was cleaning the executive floor, she noticed a new employee, a young man who couldn't have been more than 22, standing in the hallway, looking lost. He wore an ill-fitting suit that seemed borrowed, and his expression was one of pure panic as he stared at a building directory on his phone. Excuse me, Emily said softly, pushing her cart to the side. Are you okay? The young man looked up, relief flooding his face. I'm supposed to be in a meeting on the 40th floor, but I took the wrong elevator, and now I can't figure out how to get back, and I'm already 10 minutes late, and... He stopped, taking a breath. Sorry, I'm rambling. Emily smiled gently. It's okay. The express elevators are confusing at first. Come on, I'll show you. She guided him to the correct elevator bank, explaining the building's layout as they walked. The young man, his name was David, he told her, was an intern in the accounting department, fresh out of college and terrified of making a bad impression. You'll do fine, Emily assured him as the elevator arrived. Everyone feels lost their first week. Just breathe. Thank you so much, David said earnestly. I really appreciate it. What's your name? Emily. Well, Emily, you just saved my life. He grinned as he stepped into the elevator. I owe you one. As the doors closed, Emily felt a small warmth bloom in her chest. It was a tiny moment, insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but it reminded her why she kept going. Small acts of kindness. They mattered. They had to. Meanwhile, James Whitestone found himself doing something he'd never done before, watching the cleaning staff. It started unconsciously. He'd be working late in his office, and through the glass walls, he'd catch glimpses of Emily moving through the building. She worked methodically with an attention to detail that surprised him. She didn't cut corners. She didn't rush through her tasks just to finish early. Every surface she touched was left immaculate. But it wasn't just her work ethic that caught his attention. It was the small interactions she had with others. On Tuesday, he'd seen her offer her lunch to the security guard in the stairwell. On Wednesday, she'd stayed an extra 30 minutes to help the janitor fix a broken vacuum cleaner. And tonight, he'd watched her guide that lost intern to the correct elevator with infinite patience, treating him like he mattered. James sat at his desk, the HR file still tucked in his drawer. He'd read it 3 times now, each time feeling that same uncomfortable sensation in his chest. Emily Rivera wasn't just a cleaning lady. She was a 25-year-old woman raising her teenage brother alone, working multiple jobs, taking online college courses at night. She was fighting a battle he couldn't begin to comprehend, and she was doing it with grace and dignity, and he had humiliated her in front of 15 people. James leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He'd built his empire on ruthless efficiency and high standards. Emotions were weaknesses. Sentimentality was a liability. His father had taught him that, drilled it into him from childhood. Winners and losers. That was the world. There was no in-between. But something about Emily Rivera challenged that belief, and James wasn't sure how to process it. Friday evening, Emily left work at her usual time, catching the subway to Queens. But instead of heading home, she took a detour to the Brooklyn Community Center, a modest building wedged between a laundromat and a bodega. She'd been volunteering there for 2 years, running a tutoring program for at-risk teenagers every Friday night. Inside, the center was alive with activity. A group of teens sat around folding tables, working on homework, while volunteers circulated to offer help. Emily recognized most of the kids. Marcus, who was struggling with algebra, Tiana, who dreamed of becoming a writer, Jamal, who'd recently lost his father and was barely keeping it together. "Miss Emily," Tiana called out, waving enthusiastically. "Can you help me with this essay?" Emily dropped her bag and sat down beside her, reading over the draft. "This is really good, Tiana. Your imagery here is powerful." "You think so?" Tiana's eyes lit up. "I want it to be perfect for the scholarship application." "It will be," Emily said warmly. "You've got real talent. Don't doubt yourself." For the next 3 hours, Emily moved from student to student, offering encouragement, answering questions, and simply listening when they needed to talk. This was where she felt most alive, not in the sterile corporate offices of Whitestone Holdings, but here, surrounded by kids who reminded her so much of herself and Marco. At 9 o'clock, as the center began to close, Marcus approached her hesitantly. "Miss Emily, can I ask you something?" "Of course. How do you keep going? Like, when everything feels impossible?" Emily looked at the 16-year-old, seeing the fear and exhaustion in his eyes. She recognized it intimately. "You just take it one day at a time," she said softly. "You show up, even when it's hard, and you remember that you're stronger than you think." Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "Thanks, Miss Emily." As Emily finally headed home that night, exhausted but fulfilled, she had no idea that James Whitestone had followed her. He sat in his car across the street from the community center, watching her emerge with a tired smile on her face, watching her stop to help an elderly woman carry groceries up the steps of a nearby building. James gripped the steering wheel, something cracking open inside him, something he'd kept locked away for years. Emily Rivera wasn't surviving. She was living with purpose, with compassion, with a strength that had nothing to do with money or power. And James Whitestone had never felt smaller in his entire life. Saturday morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through the thin curtains of Emily's studio apartment. She woke to the sound of Marco coughing in the next room. Not the small room, really, just the other side of the partition she'd hung to give him some privacy. The apartment was barely 400 square feet, with a kitchenette that consisted of a hot plate, a mini fridge, and a microwave they'd bought secondhand. Emily sat up, rubbing her eyes. Her body ached from the week's work, her shoulders tight with tension that never seemed to fully release, but there was no time to rest. Saturdays meant her second job, stocking shelves at a grocery store in Astoria from 9 to 5. "Marco?" she called softly. "You okay?" "I'm fine," came his muffled reply, followed by another cough. Emily pulled back the curtain to find her brother sitting on his narrow bed, his inhaler clutched in one hand. He looked pale, dark circles under his eyes that mirrored her own. At 15, Marco was all gangly limbs and defiant independence, but Emily could still see the scared little boy he'd been when their parents died. "Did you use your inhaler?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Yeah." Marco avoided her eyes. We need to talk about something." Her stomach clenched. "What's wrong?" "I got the letter from school yesterday, about the field trip to D.C. next month." He pulled a crumpled paper from his backpack. "It's for the advanced history students. Mr. Patterson says it's important for college applications, but..." Emily took the paper, scanning the cost. $350. Her heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral. "But what?" "But I know we can't afford it," Marco said quietly. "It's okay. I don't need to go." The resignation in his voice broke something inside her. Marco never asked for anything. He wore shoes 2 sizes too small without complaining. He ate ramen 4 nights a week and called it his favorite food. He pretended not to notice when Emily skipped meals so he could have seconds. "You're going," Emily said firmly. You're going, Marco. I'll figure it out." "How?" "You're already working 2 jobs, taking classes online, volunteering. His voice cracked. "When do you even sleep?" Emily pulled him into a hug, feeling his thin shoulders shake. "Hey, listen to me. You are going to get out of here. You're going to college. You're going to have opportunities I never had, and you're going to make something incredible of your life. That's not negotiable." Marco pulled back, wiping his eyes roughly. "What about you? What about your dreams?" "You are my dream," Emily said simply. "Everything I do is worth it if you get the life you deserve." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their circumstances pressing down on them. Finally, Marco spoke again. "I got an A on my chemistry test. Highest grade in the class." Emily's face lit up. "Marco, that's amazing. See, you're brilliant. That's why you need this trip. Only if you promise to stop skipping lunch," Marco countered. "Mrs. Chen from downstairs said she saw you give your food to the security guard at your work." "Mrs. Chen needs to mind her own business," Emily muttered, but she was smiling. Monday morning, James Whitestone arrived at the office to find Lauren waiting outside his door with an unusual expression, something between determination and apprehension. "We need to discuss the company culture," Lauren said without preamble as James unlocked his office. James raised an eyebrow. "Good morning to you too, Lauren." "I'm serious, Mr. Whitestone." She followed him inside, closing the door behind them. "Since the incident last week, I've had 3 staff members express concerns about workplace environment. The younger employees especially are uncomfortable." James set his briefcase down, his jaw tightening. "Are they uncomfortable with high standards?" "They're uncomfortable with public humiliation," Lauren replied evenly. "There's a difference between holding people accountable and degrading them in front of their peers." "I see." James's voice was cold. "Is there anything else?" Lauren hesitated, then placed a folder on his desk. "I took the liberty of compiling some information about Emily Rivera, not just her HR file, also testimonials from other employees. I didn't ask for this. I know, but I think you should read it anyway." Lauren met his gaze steadily. "Sir, with all due respect, you're one of the smartest businessmen I know, but sometimes intelligence isn't enough. Sometimes we need empathy too." After Lauren left, James sat alone in his office, staring at the folder. He didn't want to open it. He didn't want to feel whatever uncomfortable emotion would inevitably surface. But his hand moved almost of its own accord, pulling the folder toward him. Inside were printed emails and handwritten notes. Tom, the security guard, describing how Emily always checked on him, how she'd once given him her bus fare when he was short on cash. David, the intern, explaining how Emily had saved him from being late to his first important meeting. A custodian named Carlos wrote about how Emily stayed late to help him fix equipment, never complaining, always smiling. The final page was a photocopy of something else entirely. Emily's college transcript. She was taking courses in business administration through an online program, maintaining a 3.9 GPA while working 2 jobs and raising her brother. James leaned back in his chair, the papers scattered across his desk. He thought about his own journey, how he'd inherited his father's company, how he'd been given every advantage, every opportunity. He'd never had to choose between food and medicine. He'd never had to walk through a blizzard to earn minimum wage. He'd never had to be strong the way Emily Rivera was strong. For the first time in years, James Whitestone felt ashamed, and he had no idea what to do about it. The following Tuesday, Emily arrived at work to find an envelope taped to her cleaning cart. Her name was written across it in neat handwriting. She glanced around the empty storage room, confused, before carefully opening it. Inside was a handwritten note on expensive cardstock. "Please come to my office at 4 p.m. today. James Whitestone." Emily's hands trembled as she reread the message. Her first instinct was panic. Was she being fired? Had she done something wrong? The boardroom incident had been 2 weeks ago, but maybe he'd finally decided she wasn't worth keeping around. She spent the entire day in a state of anxious dread, her stomach churning with each passing hour. By 3:30, she'd changed out of her work uniform into the only presentable clothes she owned, a simple black sweater and jeans that were clean but worn. She stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, trying to calm her racing heart. "Whatever happens, you'll figure it out," she told herself. "You always do." At exactly 4 o'clock, Emily knocked on the frosted glass door of James Whitestone's corner office. "Come in," his voice called from inside. Emily pushed the door open, stepping into a space that seemed designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. Modern art hung on the walls. The furniture looked like it belonged in a museum, and behind an enormous mahogany desk sat James Whitestone, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Miss Rivera," he said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs across from his desk. "Please, sit down." Emily perched on the edge of the chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She couldn't bring herself to look directly at him. James cleared his throat, and for the first time since Emily had known of his existence, he seemed uncertain. "I asked you here because I owe you an apology." Emily's eyes snapped up to meet his. "Sir? What I did 2 weeks ago in the boardroom?" James paused, choosing his words carefully. It was inappropriate, unprofessional, and cruel. He leaned forward, his expression serious. "You didn't deserve to be spoken to that way, especially not in front of others. I'm sorry." Emily sat frozen, unable to process what she was hearing. In her entire life, no one in a position of power had ever apologized to her. Not teachers, not supervisors, not landlords. People like James Whitestone didn't say sorry to people like her. Her voice came out as a whisper. "Thank you, sir. There's more." James continued. He pulled out a folder, the one Lauren had given him, and slid it across the desk. "I've learned some things about you over the past few weeks. Your work ethic, your dedication to your brother, your volunteer work at the community center, you're taking online college courses while working 2 jobs. That's remarkable." Emily felt heat rising in her cheeks. "I'm just doing what I have to do." "No," James said firmly. "You're doing far more than that. You're showing up for people who need you, even when you're barely keeping your own head above water. That takes strength most people don't have." He paused, including me. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. "Why are you telling me this?" Emily asked quietly. James leaned back in his chair, something vulnerable flickering across his features. "Because I've spent the last 2 weeks watching you, Miss Rivera, watching how you treat people, how you give even when you have nothing left to give, and it made me realize something about myself that I'm not particularly proud of." "What's that?" "That I've confused success with character," James admitted. "I thought being powerful meant being hard, untouchable. I thought people were either winners or losers, and compassion was weakness." He met her eyes. "You've proven me wrong about all of it." Emily didn't know what to say. This conversation felt surreal, like she'd stepped into someone else's life. "I want to help you," James said, "if you'll let me." Immediately, Emily's defenses went up. She'd learned long ago that nothing came without strings attached. "I don't need charity, Mr. Whitestone." "It's not charity, it's opportunity." James pulled out another document. "Whitestone Holdings has a scholarship program for employees pursuing higher education. I want to nominate you. Full tuition coverage, plus a stipend for books and living expenses. And I'd like to offer you an entry-level position in our marketing department. Paid, of course. You'd still be able to work around your class schedule." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Why would you do that?" "Because you've earned it," James said simply. "And because I'm tired of being the kind of person who tears people down instead of building them up." He pushed the papers toward her. "Think about it. There's no pressure, but the offer is genuine." Emily stared at the documents, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. Part of her wanted to accept immediately, to grab this lifeline with both hands. But another part, the part that had survived 8 years of disappointment and broken promises, whispered caution. "I need time," she said finally, "to think about it." "Take all the time you need," James replied. "But Emily?" He waited until she looked at him. "You deserve this. You deserve every opportunity in the world. Don't let pride convince you otherwise." As Emily left his office, clutching the papers to her chest, her mind was spinning. She thought about Marco's field trip, about the bills piling up on their kitchen counter, about the dreams she'd buried so deep she'd almost forgotten they existed. Maybe, just maybe, things were about to change. But in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered, "What's the catch?" Emily didn't go straight home after her meeting with James. Instead, she walked through Central Park as the sun began to set, the scholarship papers folded carefully in her bag, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant hot dog carts. Joggers passed by, along with tourists taking photos, and couples walking hand in hand, all of them living lives that seemed impossibly simple compared to hers. She found an empty bench near the lake and sat down, pulling out the documents James had given her. The scholarship details were laid out in clear, formal language. Full tuition coverage for a 4-year degree program, a monthly stipend of $1,500 for living expenses, and a guaranteed position in the marketing department with a starting salary that made her heart skip a beat. $45,000 a year. It was more money than she'd ever imagined making. It was enough to move Marco into a better apartment, to buy him new clothes that actually fit, to pay for that field trip without sacrificing groceries. It was enough to stop feeling like she was drowning every single day. But the voice of doubt was louder now, whispering questions she couldn't ignore. Why you? What does he really want? What happens when he changes his mind? Her phone buzzed. A text from Marco. When are you coming home? Made spaghetti. Well, tried to. It's edible, I think. Emily smiled despite herself. On my way. Save me some. As she stood to leave, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her press accept. Emily Rivera? A woman's voice, professional and warm. Yes? This is Patricia Hernandez from the Brooklyn Community Center. I'm calling because we have an emergency situation. Jamal, one of your students. He's here, but he's refusing to go home. His mother called the police and things are escalating. He asked for you specifically. I know it's last minute, but I'll be there in 20 minutes, Emily said, already heading toward the subway. When Emily arrived at the community center, she found Jamal sitting on the front steps, his head in his hands, while a police officer stood nearby speaking with Patricia. The 16-year-old looked up when he heard Emily's voice, relief flooding his face. Miss Emily, he said, his voice breaking. I'm sorry. I didn't know who else to call. Emily sat beside him, nodding to the officer that she had it under control. What happened, Jamal? My mom's boyfriend. Jamal's jaw clenched. He came back, the one who hit her last year. She let him back in and I told her I wouldn't stay there if he was there, and she chose him. So I left. Tears streamed down his face. I don't have anywhere else to go. Emily's heart broke. She knew this story too well. The impossible choices, the feeling of being utterly alone in the world. She glanced at the police officer, then back at Jamal. Can you give us a minute? She asked the officer quietly. He nodded, stepping away to speak with Patricia. Emily took Jamal's hand. Listen to me. You did the right thing by leaving. Your safety comes first. Always. But we need to figure this out the right way, okay? There are resources. People who can help. I'm tired of being helped, Jamal said bitterly. I'm tired of caseworkers and group homes and people who act like they care but disappear when things get hard. You're the only one who's ever actually been there. The weight of his words settled on Emily's shoulders. She thought about the scholarship papers in her bag, about the opportunity James had offered her, and then she thought about all the Jamals in the world, kids who needed someone to show up, someone to stay. You're not going into the system tonight, Emily said firmly. She turned to Patricia. Can he stay with you temporarily while we sort this out? Patricia nodded. Of course. I have a spare room. Relief washed over Jamal's face, but Emily wasn't finished. She spent the next 2 hours making phone calls, to social services, to Jamal's school counselor, to a lawyer she'd met through the community center who did pro bono work. By the time she left, Jamal had a safety plan. Patricia had temporary emergency guardianship paperwork in process, and a court hearing was scheduled for the following week. It was past midnight when Emily finally made it home. Marco was asleep on the couch, his history textbook open on his chest. She covered him with a blanket and sat at their small kitchen table, exhaustion seeping into her bones. The scholarship papers stared up at her. Emily thought about James's words. You deserve this. Don't let pride convince you otherwise. But it wasn't about pride. It was about trust. It was about believing that someone from that world, the world of corner offices and expensive suits, could genuinely care about someone from hers. Emily picked up a pen and began filling out the application, not because she was certain it was real, but because Jamal's face kept flashing in her mind. If she took this opportunity, she could help more kids like him. She could be the person who stayed. And maybe, just maybe, James Whitestone really did mean what he said. Or maybe she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Either way, she had to try. Thursday morning, Emily returned to Whitestone Holdings with the completed scholarship application tucked in an envelope. Her hands were clammy as she rode the elevator up to the executive floor, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd barely slept the night before, second-guessing her decision 100 times. Lauren greeted her outside James's office with a genuine smile. Emily, good morning. Mr. Whitestone is expecting you. He is? Emily hadn't told anyone she was coming. He asked me to watch for you, Lauren said warmly. Go ahead in. James was standing by the window when Emily entered, hands in his pockets, staring out at the city skyline. He turned when he heard the door close, and something in his expression softened when he saw her. "Miss Rivera," he said, "thank you for coming." Emily held out the envelope. "I filled out the application, but I need to ask you something first." "Of course." She took a breath, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "Why are you really doing this? And please don't tell me it's because I earned it. People like me don't get opportunities like this without a reason." James was quiet for a moment, then gestured to the chairs by his desk. "Sit, please." Once they were both seated, James leaned forward, his expression more vulnerable than Emily had ever seen it. "My father built this company from nothing," he began. "He was brilliant, ruthless, and completely devoid of empathy. He taught me that compassion was weakness, that the world was divided into winners and losers, and our job was to make sure we stayed on top." He paused. "I spent 20 years believing him." Emily listened, saying nothing. "Then I watched you give your lunch to a security guard," James continued. "I watched you help a lost intern. I watched you volunteer at a community center after working 2 jobs, and I realized that everything my father taught me was wrong." He met her eyes. "You're stronger than I'll ever be, Emily. Not because you're ruthless, but because you're kind, despite having every reason not to be." "That still doesn't answer my question," Emily said quietly. "Why me?" "Because I need to believe that people can change," James said simply. "I need to believe that I can be better than my father was. And maybe helping you is selfish. Maybe I'm doing it to prove something to myself. But it's also genuine. I see potential in you that shouldn't be wasted cleaning floors." Emily studied his face, searching for deception and finding only honesty. It scared her more than a lie would have. "If I accept this," she said slowly, "I need you to understand something. I'm not a project. I'm not your redemption arc. And if this is about easing your guilt, I'd rather you just donate to charity." James actually smiled at that. "Fair enough. How about this? I'm offering you an opportunity because you've earned it, and I'm hoping that by supporting you, I can start repairing the damage I've done, not just to you, but to everyone I've dismissed or underestimated over the years." He extended his hand. "Deal?" Emily looked at his outstretched hand, then back at his face. Finally, she shook it. "Deal. But I'm watching you, Mr. Whitestone. One sign that this isn't real, and I'm out. I wouldn't expect anything less." The news of Emily's scholarship and promotion spread through the office within hours. The reactions were mixed. Some employees, like Lauren and Tom, were genuinely thrilled. Others whispered behind closed doors about favoritism and special treatment. David, the intern Emily had helped, stopped by her new desk in the marketing department that afternoon with a coffee. "I heard the news. Congratulations, Emily. You deserve this." "Thank you," Emily said, still feeling surreal about the whole situation. She now had an actual desk, a computer, business cards being printed with her name on them. It felt like someone else's life. "Some people are saying negative things," David added quietly, "about how you got this position. I just wanted you to know that those of us who've actually talked to you know the truth." Emily nodded, unsurprised. She'd expected the gossip. "Thanks for the heads up." But not everyone's skepticism came from malice. That evening, as Emily was packing up to leave, a woman in her mid-40s approached her desk. Miranda Chen, the senior marketing director, had a reputation for being brilliant and notoriously difficult to impress. "Emily Rivera," Miranda said, her tone neutral. "You're the new hire everyone's talking about." "I guess so," Emily replied carefully. "I'll be honest with you," Miranda said, crossing her arms. "I don't care how you got this job. I care if you can do it. This department has standards, and I won't lower them for anyone, scholarship or not." "I wouldn't want you to," Emily said, meeting her gaze steadily. "I'm here to work, not to be coddled." Something flickered in Miranda's eyes. Respect, maybe, or at least acknowledgement. "Good. Then we'll get along fine. Welcome to marketing, Rivera. I hope you're a fast learner." As Miranda walked away, Emily released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. This was going to be harder than she'd imagined. She wasn't just fighting against her circumstances anymore. She was fighting against people's assumptions, their doubts, their belief that she didn't belong. But Emily had been fighting her entire life. She knew how to prove people wrong. She just hoped she could prove herself right too. 3 weeks into her new position, Emily was drowning. Not in the way she'd drowned before, in bills and exhaustion and fear, but in information, expectations, and a world she didn't fully understand. Marketing terminology flew over her head in meetings. Her colleagues referenced campaigns and strategies she'd never heard of. And despite working 12-hour days, She felt like she was constantly playing catch-up. Miranda hadn't been exaggerating about her standards. She was demanding, perfectionist, and showed no mercy for mistakes. When Emily presented her first campaign proposal, a social media strategy for a new client, Miranda tore it apart in front of the entire team. "This is surface-level thinking," Miranda said, tapping her pen against the printed document. "You're not considering audience segmentation, you haven't analyzed competitor positioning, and your ROI projections are based on assumptions rather than data." She looked at Emily directly. "Do it again, and this time, do the research." Emily's face burned with humiliation, but she nodded. "Yes, ma'am." After the meeting, she locked herself in the bathroom and cried for exactly 3 minutes. Then she washed her face, fixed her hair, and got back to work. That evening, long after everyone else had gone home, Emily was still at her desk, surrounded by marketing textbooks she'd checked out from the library and articles she'd printed from online journals. Her eyes burned from staring at the computer screen, but she refused to give up. "You're still here." Emily jumped, looking up to find James standing in the doorway of the marketing department. He'd loosened his tie and he looked tired, more human than she'd ever seen him. "I have to redo this proposal," Emily explained, gesturing to the chaos on her desk. "Miranda wants it by Monday, and Her voice cracked slightly. "I don't know if I can do this, Mr. Whitestone. Everyone else here has degrees from fancy schools. They've been studying this stuff for years. Stop," James said firmly, walking over to her desk. He pulled up a chair and sat down beside her. "Show me what you're working on." For the next 2 hours, James walked Emily through the proposal, explaining concepts she didn't understand, showing her how to analyze data, teaching her the frameworks that Miranda expected. He was patient, thorough, and surprisingly kind. But more than that, he treated her like an equal, like someone capable of learning, not someone who needed to be rescued. "You're not struggling because you're not smart enough," James said as they wrapped up. "You're struggling because you're learning an entirely new language, and that takes time. But Emily, you're one of the most intelligent people I've met. You just need to give yourself permission to be a beginner." Emily looked at him, something shifting in her perception. This wasn't the cold, arrogant CEO who had humiliated her weeks ago. This was someone trying, genuinely trying to be better. "Thank you," she said softly, "for this, for all of it." James smiled slightly. "You're doing the hard part. I'm just opening doors you should have had access to all along." The following Monday, Emily presented her revised proposal. Miranda listened intently, asked sharp questions, and then, for the first time since Emily had started, nodded slowly. "This is better," Miranda said. "Much better. You've clearly put in the work." She paused, then added, "Keep this up, Rivera. You might actually have potential." It wasn't effusive praise, but coming from Miranda, it was everything. Over lunch, Lauren pulled Emily aside in the break room. "I heard Miranda actually complimented you. That's like spotting a unicorn." Emily laughed, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. "She terrifies me, honestly." "She terrifies everyone," Lauren said with a grin. "But she's the best in the business. If you can earn her respect, you can make it anywhere." She hesitated, then added, "I've been meaning to tell you. I'm really glad you're here. The office feels different since you started." "Better." "Different how?" Lauren thought for a moment. "More human, I guess. You remind people that there's life outside these walls. And I think James needed that reminder most of all." Emily glanced through the glass walls toward James's office, where he was on a phone call, gesturing animatedly. "He's changed," she said quietly. "Or maybe I'm just seeing a different side of him." "Maybe both," Lauren replied. "People can surprise you." That evening, Emily went straight to the community center. Jamal was there, working on his homework with Patricia supervising. The court had granted Patricia temporary guardianship while his mother went through a mandatory intervention program. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was safe. "Miss Emily?" Jamal looked up, smiling. "I got a B+ on my English essay." "Mr. Peterson said it was one of the best in the class." Emily hugged him tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Jamal." "It's because of you," he said. "You showed up when everyone else gave up on me." As Emily helped him with his algebra homework, she thought about James's words. "You just need to give yourself permission to be a beginner." Maybe that applied to more than just work. Maybe it applied to trust, to hope, to believing that good things could happen to people like her. Maybe it applied to second chances, both giving them and accepting them. For the first time in 8 years, Emily allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't just about survival, a future where she thrived. and it terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. 6 weeks after accepting the scholarship, Emily was starting to feel like she belonged. Her revised campaign had been approved by the client, Miranda had assigned her to a major project, and she'd even begun to make friends with some of her colleagues. The gossip had mostly died down, replaced by grudging respect as people saw how hard she worked. But success came with complications she hadn't anticipated. Marco had initially been thrilled about their improved circumstances. They'd moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood, he'd gone on his field trip to Washington, D.C., and Emily had been able to buy him new clothes and books. But lately, he'd grown distant, spending more time in his room, avoiding her questions about school. One evening, Emily came home from work to find Marco sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his phone with a troubled expression. "Hey," she said, setting down her bag. "Everything okay?" Marco looked up and she could see the conflict in his eyes. "Em, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever feel like you're selling out?" He stumbled over the words. "Like you're becoming one of them?" Emily felt her stomach clench. "What do you mean?" "You work for this huge corporation now. You wear fancy clothes. You talk about marketing strategies and client meetings." Marco's voice rose slightly. "You used to volunteer at the center 3 times a week. Now you barely go once. Jamal asked about you yesterday. He misses you." The accusation hit harder than Emily expected because part of her had been feeling the same guilt. "Marco, I'm trying to build a better life for us." "I know," he interrupted, "and I'm grateful I am. But what if the cost is losing who you are? What if you become like them? Like people who only care about money and success?" "That's not fair," Emily said, her voice shaking. "I'm still the same person." "Are you?" Marco challenged. "Because the sister I knew would never be too busy for kids who need her." He left the room before Emily could respond, his door closing with a soft click that felt louder than a slam. Emily stood alone in the kitchen, Marco's words echoing in her mind. She thought about Jamal, about Tiana and Marcus and all the other kids at the center. She'd told herself she was too busy, too tired, that she needed to focus on establishing herself in her new role. But the truth was more complicated. Part of her had been trying to leave that world behind, to become someone new, someone who belonged in glass towers and corner offices. And in doing so, she'd been abandoning the people who needed her most. The next morning, Emily arrived at James's office before he did. When he walked in, coffee in hand, he found her sitting in one of the chairs, her expression serious. "Emily," he said, surprised, "is everything okay?" "I need to talk to you about something," she said, "and I need you to be honest with me." James set down his coffee and sat across from her. "Of course. When you gave me this opportunity, did you expect me to change who I am?" Emily asked directly. "Did you expect me to become more like you? More corporate? More detached?" James looked taken aback. "No, absolutely not. Why would you think that?" "Because I'm starting to lose myself," Emily admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "I've been so focused on proving I belong here that I've neglected the things that actually matter. The community center, the kids I mentor, even my own brother. Marco barely recognizes me anymore." "Then change it," James said simply. "What?" "Emily, the reason I offered you this opportunity wasn't so you could become like me. It was so you could become more fully yourself, with resources and support." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "If the community center matters to you, make time for it. If those kids need you, be there for them. Don't sacrifice your values for a paycheck. But the job demands are not more important than your humanity." James interrupted. "Trust me, I learned that the hard way." He paused, then added, "In fact, I've been thinking about this company's responsibility to the community. What if we formalized it?" Emily looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "A corporate community outreach program," James explained, his eyes lighting up with the idea. "Whitestone Holdings could partner with local centers like yours, providing funding, volunteers, and resources, and you could lead it. Part of your role could be developing and managing these initiatives." Emily's breath caught. "Are you serious?" "Completely. We have the resources to make a real difference, and you have the expertise and passion. It's a perfect match." James smiled. "You don't have to choose between success and service, Emily. You can have both." For the first time in weeks, Emily felt something unclenching in her chest. "I'd need to spend at least 2 afternoons a week at the community center, and some Saturdays." "Done. Put together a proposal, and we'll present it to the board next month." Emily stood, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Thank you, Mr. Whitestone. Really." "James," he corrected. I think we're past formalities at this point. As Emily left his office, she pulled out her phone and texted Marco. You're right. I've been losing myself, but I'm going to fix it. I love you. His response came almost immediately. I love you too. Just don't forget where you came from. Emily smiled, typing back, never. That's what makes me strong. The evening of the company celebration arrived with an unseasonable warmth, as if the city itself were holding its breath for what was to come. Emily stood in her small bedroom, staring at the dress hanging on her closet door. A simple navy blue dress that Lauren had helped her pick out. It was the first time in her life she'd bought something new for herself, and the thought still made her uncomfortable. You look nervous, Marco said from the doorway, already dressed in the button-down shirt Emily had bought him for special occasions. I am nervous, Emily admitted. James is announcing the community outreach program tonight, in front of everyone. You've earned this, Em. Marco walked over and hugged her tightly. I'm sorry for what I said before, about you selling out. I was scared of losing you. You'll never lose me, Emily said, pulling back to look at him. We're a team. Always. Always, Marco echoed, smiling. The rooftop lounge of Whitestone Holdings had been transformed for the celebration. String lights crisscrossed overhead, creating a canopy of warm light against the darkening sky. Tables laden with food lined one wall, and a small stage had been set up at the far end. Employees mingled, their laughter and conversation filling the air. Emily arrived with Marco, feeling out of place despite the weeks she'd spent in this world. Lauren spotted them immediately and rushed over, pulling Emily into a hug. You look beautiful, Lauren said warmly. And you must be Marco. Emily talks about you constantly. Marco shook her hand, grinning. All good things, I hope. Only the best, Lauren assured him. As they made their way through the crowd, Emily was surprised by how many people stopped to greet her. David, the intern, introduced her to his supervisor. Miranda actually smiled, an expression Emily had rarely seen, and told her the community outreach proposal was compelling work. Even Tom, the security guard, was there, looking dapper in a suit Emily suspected James had provided. Never thought I'd be invited to something like this, Tom said, his eyes glistening slightly. Mr. Whitestone personally asked me to come, said I was part of the team. Emily squeezed his hand. You always were, Tom. At 8 o'clock, James took the stage. The conversations quieted, all eyes turning toward him. He looked different tonight, not the cold CEO Emily had first encountered, but someone more genuine, more human. Thank you all for being here, James began, his voice carrying across the rooftop. Tonight is about celebrating our success this quarter, but it's also about acknowledging something I've been blind to for too long. He paused, scanning the crowd until his eyes found Emily. 6 weeks ago, I humiliated one of our employees in front of a room full of people. I called out Emily Rivera for a smudge on a window, dismissing her worth and her dignity, because I believed she was beneath me. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Emily felt her face flush, but she held James's gaze. What I didn't know, James continued, was that Emily had arrived 2 hours early that morning, walking through a blizzard to afford her brother's medication. What I didn't know was that she worked multiple jobs to raise her brother after losing her parents. What I didn't know was that she volunteered at a community center, mentored at-risk teenagers, and showed more compassion in one day than I'd shown in years. He stepped away from the podium, his expression open and vulnerable. Emily Rivera taught me something crucial, that real strength isn't in power or wealth. It's in showing up for others, even when you're barely surviving yourself. It's in giving when you have nothing left. It's in maintaining your humanity when the world tries to strip it away. James gestured for Emily to join him on stage. Her legs felt shaky as she climbed the steps, Marco squeezing her hand before she let go. Emily, James said, turning to face her, I owe you a public apology for the way I treated you. You didn't deserve that. No one does. He addressed the crowd again. But more than apologizing, I want to honor Emily's values and make them part of this company's mission. He unveiled a banner that read, The Emily Rivera Community Initiative. Effective immediately, Whitestone Holdings is launching a comprehensive community outreach program. We'll partner with local centers, providing funding, volunteers, and educational opportunities for young people in need. Emily will lead this initiative while continuing her work in marketing. We're also establishing a scholarship fund in her name, offering support to employees and community members pursuing education while facing financial hardship. The crowd erupted in applause. Emily felt tears streaming down her face, But for once, she didn't try to hide them. James extended his hand, but this time, instead of a handshake, he pulled her into a brief, respectful hug. "Thank you," he whispered, "for showing me who I could be." When Emily returned to Marco, he was crying too, pride radiating from his face. Around them, people pressed forward, not just to congratulate her, but to share their own stories. A young woman from accounting talked about struggling to pay for her mother's cancer treatment. A man from IT mentioned his daughter's special needs and the costs that came with it. Person after person, revealing the invisible battles they fought every day. Emily realized something profound. She wasn't alone. She'd never been alone. The world was full of people like her, people who showed up, who fought, who survived with grace and dignity. They just never had anyone acknowledge their strength before. As the celebration continued, Emily found herself standing at the rooftop's edge, looking out over the city that had always seemed so impossibly vast and indifferent. But tonight it looked different. It looked full of possibility. James joined her, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. He offered her one, and they stood in companionable silence for a moment. "You changed my life," James said quietly. "I want you to know that. You changed mine too," Emily replied. "But I think we changed each other." "To second chances?" James raised his glass. Emily clinked hers against his, smiling through her tears. "To second chances, and to remembering where we came from." As the night wore on, Emily danced with Marco, laughed with Lauren, and listened to Jamal, who'd come with Patricia, talk excitedly about his plans for college. She watched James speaking with Tom, genuinely listening to his stories, treating him like the valuable person he'd always been. The glass towers would always be there, gleaming and impressive. But now Emily knew that real power wasn't found in corner offices or stock portfolios. It was found in moments like these, in connection, compassion, and the courage to see each other's humanity. She'd survived on strength alone for so long. But tonight, surrounded by people who saw her, truly saw her, Emily finally understood what it meant to thrive, and it was more beautiful than she'd ever imagined. The end. Did you like this story? Would you have done anything differently? Tell me in the comments. See you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe now to receive more exciting stories that you won't want to miss. Thank you very much.